You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I did something new. I have gotten requests to share more of my own insights and experiences as an ADHD coach. I in fact originally intended to do this, but thought it would make for a better listen if I had someone interview me. So I asked my nephew, whose name is Yehuda Liss, to come on the podcast and do exactly that. He is fun, smart, and intellectually curious, so I thought he was the right man for the job. I still do. I always appreciate when you send feedback, but I would especially appreciate your thoughts on this type of setup. My email address, as always, is in the show notes. We discussed my background and how I landed in ADHD coaching, the relationship between ADHD and screen time, things that look like ADHD but aren't, what my process of ADHD coaching looks like, the most common issues that people seek ADHD coaching for, including prioritizing tasks and procrastination, how many individuals with ADHD are well suited for entrepreneurship and the challenges that arise in entrepreneurship, the difficulties focusing attention for work or school and emotional dysregulation, and how coaching can help, anxiety and OCD that frequently come along with ADHD, and my being trained to address these as well, how my training has helped me in my classroom teaching, and a lot more. A few clarifications. Yehuda brought up the phenomenon of increased ADHD diagnoses, so we discussed my thoughts about this. However, my thoughts are based on my own observations and not from formal training or research, so they're just that and no more. We also discussed the effects of ADHD medication on individuals who don't have ADHD. Once again, these were also observations and anecdotal. I mentioned something I wish my ADHD coaching instructor had told me sooner. I just want to clarify that was a rare critique, and otherwise, I thought she was awesome. Also, we began to discuss anxiety and OCD, but didn't finish the discussion. There's a lot of valuable information we can further discuss about these, and we did discuss them a bit more in the episode with Rabbi David Graham. I would be more than happy to discuss them more in future episodes. You can let me know if you're interested. Finally, pardon the shameless plug, but it's my podcast after all. So, if you like what you heard in this episode, a friendly reminder that I provide coaching for individuals, couples, parents, and occasionally teens. I offer speaking engagements as well. My contact info is in the show notes. Quick shout out to the Chinuch Today podcast hosted by former ADHD Heroes podcast guest Rabbi Shmuel Garfield. And now, on to this very special episode. Enjoy!
All right, everybody. Welcome back to a very special episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. You may not recognize my voice. My name is Yehuda Liss, and I am the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel Reich here. This is going to be a specifically special episode of the podcast this week because we know you love hearing from him every week and hearing him interview very special guests. But this week, we're going to get to hear from the ADHD coach legend and rabbi himself, Rabbi Uncle Shmuel Reich. How are we doing today, Uncle?
We're doing great. We're having a good time. We are very excited for this very special episode, and what an introduction that was. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. All right, so everybody hears you every week, but I'm not sure how familiar they are with who you are and what your background is, how you got into ADHD coaching. You want to give us a little bit of background info about yourself and how you got into it?
Okay, sounds good. So I grew up in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. I spent a lot of years in yeshiva, high school, post-high school, became a rabbi, and then I was looking to do something alongside teaching. Teaching and mental health tend to be a good team. More on that a little bit later. And it was something interesting to me. And I decided to go the coaching route. So after close to a year of training as a life coach, I was looking for a specialty. And someone mentioned to me the possibility of ADHD coaching. And I was like, whoa, that's a great idea. Between my always having gravitated towards that personality type, and maybe seeing one or two students with ADHD in my classroom one time, and maybe seeing it around some family trees, it seemed very interesting right out of the gate. So I trained in that. Within a few months, I had learned quite a bit. I began my practice just about 7 years ago. And after a couple of years of that, I was seeing a lot of clients who had anxiety and OCD along with the ADHD. So I trained in those also. So that's what I do. I still teach. I teach high school guys. I like the jumpy ones, and hopefully we find each other well, understand each other. And I still have my private practice as an ADHD coach, sometimes with anxiety and OCD to go. And I also have a blog and my podcast, and here we are.
That's awesome. You want to give a quick shout out to where your blog can be found?
Well, my blog is on Nefesh. It's called ADHD and Beyond. I need to do a little more blogging, but it is still there, and hopefully with more coming.
Okay, that's awesome. I actually am curious. Have you seen a difference in the amount of kids who have ADHD from when, like you said, you were in yeshiva growing up to when you became a Rebbe and actually started teaching?
Oh, that's a great question. So I have not seen a difference in the amount of kids who have ADHD. I've seen a difference in awareness of it. So meaning, when I was a kid, they didn't diagnose kids with ADHD. For people who don't like labels, they had other labels that were much less nice than ADHD. They called kids who we now say have ADHD. Didn't go over so well. Didn't work so well. So I'm grateful that we have more tools and more awareness. But no, I think it was pretty common then.
It was pretty
Um,
prevalent back then as well.
yeah, I think so.
That's interesting because a lot of people try and blame the fact that there's so many people out there with ADHD. They say that people's attention spans are kind of killed when it comes to things like social media and the fact that they're on screens from a very young age. Do you think that plays a major role in it? Or from what it sounds like you were saying about how you growing up, there were just as many kids with ADHD. Maybe that doesn't play as much of a role.
Right, that's a great question. So social media and screens play a role, but in a different way. Number one, people who don't have ADHD have their attention spans lessened and ruined by the use of screens. We had a guest on this show, Dr. David Sitt, who did a study on this, and he coined the phrase techno ADD. For folks who don't have neurological ADHD, but do have their attention spans and even sometimes their executive function hampered by their use of technology. So that's on the non-neurological ADHD side. And on the ADHD side, so these devices are designed to give you a dopamine hit. So
Yeah.
someone,
Sorry.
so
Can I
yeah,
can I can I interrupt here for a second? When you say the non-neurological side of ADHD, what exactly do you mean by that? If their behavior, because you say they'll maybe show some symptoms of ADHD, let's say, where they're easily distracted because of their techno ADD. But what do you mean when you say they're neurologically not ADHD or
oh,
ADD?
great question. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, which means a person is born with it, and that's how it is how the brain develops. It is mostly hereditary. Sometimes it can come from, you know, a mother being exposed to pollutants during pregnancy, complications in childbirth, and things like that. But things that interfere with the attention span are not called ADHD. There are many things that can interfere with the attention span, but they're not what we call ADHD. Even anxiety can affect the attention span. We had a guy on the show, Dr. Lancer Nagdechi, who mentioned that having a sore throat will also mess with your attention span, but we call it ADHD. True fact, right? But
I guess
we
so.
call it ADHD when it's neurodevelopmental. So it's the development of the brain.
Do you think there are people that have techno ADD, like that doctor you had on was calling it, that do get diagnosed with actual ADHD, even though it's not neurological?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer, but I do think that there are a lot. I mean, I don't know the answer to that specifically. There are a lot of ADHD diagnoses that are not accurate. Meaning, what happens is to get a proper diagnosis, they got to go to a psychiatrist or someone licensed, and it could be a whole to do. If the pediatrician will write them a prescription for Adderall, they'll just take it and call it a day. So
Yep.
they're so it saves them a lot of hassle. I don't really blame them, but then
Right.
sometimes they're not getting such a precise diagnosis.
That makes sense. Will for someone like that who's getting an imprecise diagnosis and doesn't have neurological ADHD, will a medicine like Adderall or the something like that still help, or can that be damaging?
So I don't think it'll be damaging. I don't know the answer for sure. What I want to say is there are definitely people that we know there's a black market for people making use of Adderall. So it seems that people who don't have ADHD do get make some use of it. Though we don't recommend it. We strongly discourage the use of controlled substances that are not prescribed. But it does seem to have that effect. But if there are underlying issues that are not ADHD, they're not being addressed. So those issues will need to be addressed. So, for example, trauma. So trauma can present as ADHD symptoms. You can give them Adderall. It might help them concentrate sometimes, but there's still a mess that needs to be cleaned up. So that's not going to help.
Yeah. Have you ever had it with like an individual you were working with as a client where you realized kind of part of the way in of coaching them that, maybe this isn't an ADHD problem and it does stem from something else like, trauma in the past or another example of that?
Yes, not many times, a couple of times, and it's a conversation. It's very common for there to be an additional professional in the picture. So because of that, it's comfortable for me to say maybe bring that up to the therapist.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let's assume that your client you're working with is really neurologically ADHD. As an ADHD coach, what exactly are you doing with them? How are you working on it with them to help them improve?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so the starting point is um, the saying "knowledge is power," which means this. Well, knowledge is power means if you know stuff, if you're knowledgeable, you can address problems more effectively. But in this context, what knowledge is power means is that understanding your ADHD brain is the beginning to creating solutions and strategies and plans to be more successful and effective. So the first thing we do is try to understand a little bit about what's happening in the ADHD brain. Not too much. We don't want to bore people, but then go on to different areas of behavior that can be affected by ADHD. Um, I've had people sort of jaws drop from this thing, like, oh my gosh, this explains my whole life. So it can be extremely helpful, both in terms of understanding, explaining a lot of their history and making them aware of what they are able to work on, that they don't have to, things don't have to remain like this with the different things that frustrate them. So that's the first thing. Then we talk strengths, hobbies, interests, because as we know, all humans have strengths, and ADHD brain often has its own, unique set of strengths. So we talk about those, and then we talk strategy. What strategy looks like is literally going from scenario to scenario of what things look like, what they want them to look like, and then figuring out how we can get them there. So it's very practical, very on the ground.
Yep. That makes sense. That makes sense. And what are some of the most common issues that you see clients having that you can help them with?
Right. So most common, I would say, are number one is prioritizing different tasks. I'd say most of my clientele on average has been entrepreneurs, sometimes employees, but they have a lot of things that need to happen at work. And especially for the entrepreneurs, figuring out what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. That's a big one. Another big one is procrastination. So things need to get done, but they aren't quite getting done. So those are probably the two biggest that I see.
Interesting. Do you find that entrepreneurship draws in a lot of people with ADHD?
Yes, yes. So the ADHD brain is both creative and a wise guy once said that impulsivity gone right is courage. So to start a business, you need to like put yourself out there a little bit. And I don't just mean, put your face on places, but you got to take a risk. So while the, neurotypical accountant brain is sitting there, with the statistics figuring out whether they should start the business or not, their ADHD counterpart might have started the business, grown it and sold it by the time they're done. That can happen. Or what can happen is that they can start a business, it doesn't work out, as often happens with businesses. So yes, entrepreneurship and ADHD also because of the creativity, the creative ideas. So yes, they can definitely be a team. Also, I would add that they're a team because a lot of folks with ADHD do not like to take orders. They do not like to follow rules. So being your own boss work great for the ADHD brain. That's a good one.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So going back to what we were saying before of some of the most common issues that you were listening before with procrastination, different things that you work with entrepreneurs a lot, that they have to make decisions on what actually needs to get done and in what order. What makes these things so difficult for someone with an ADHD brain?
So the ADHD brain has impaired or weaker executive function. The executive function part of the brain is the part of the brain that's like an executive of a company. So it makes decisions, it executes those decisions, it plans those decisions. So since the ADHD brain's executive function is less active, so those areas, the areas of creating plans, organized plans, organizing time, all those are affected by by their ADHD. So that makes deciding what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, makes all those things harder. Additionally, the ADHD brain does not like ambiguity. The executive function would usually break things down and decide um, how to break things down to user-friendly components, and then divide those up accordingly. So an impaired executive function isn't going to do that. So you'll have these long tasks, as I like to say this time of year. The worst thing you can have on a to-do list is do taxes. Do taxes means run for your life. So yeah, so the ADHD brain does not like that ambiguity. So that's why those two things are difficult.
Okay, so now that we've identified those issues, how do you actually go about and help these clients to overcome those issues?
So phase one, when it comes to prioritization and identifying what's going to happen when, so it sounds simple, but it's really not. Is we create a plan for how one schedules himself. Now, I would note that I have never had two clients with the same plan. So,
That's interesting.
but we create some sort of plan for managing tasks where they're going to keep track of what needs to happen. They're going to keep track of writing in when they're going to write that on that list, when they're going to look at that list. So there's a lot that goes into it. It sounds simple, but it is not. But there's some kind of scheduling plan for the prioritization and for the procrastination. So part of it is ADHD flavored procrastination, as described by Lynn Idris in a great talk called Push Past Procrastination. And I love a good alliteration, so that's always nice.
Yes.
Describes that ADHD flavored procrastination happens when a task is too long, too boring, or too nebulous. Now, I love a good big word, but I'll have to explain it also, which means that if it's unclear or ambiguous, to choose a different big word, but more common one. I like nebulous better, but whatever. If the steps are unclear or the task is too long or too boring, so the ADHD brain is not a happy camper, so it's just going to run. So what we need to do is create a situation where the task is clear, and what we'll do is I'll do that together with the client at first, so that they see me do it, and then they get the hang of it, and then they develop that skill. I would add that for entrepreneurs who work at home, procrastination can be a huge, a bigger issue than most, because what happens is you get up in the morning, do your morning routine, eat breakfast, whatever. It's time to start work, but nothing's making you start work. So that can be a huge hurdle. So that's the thing we've done some work on. So what do I do with that? That's a good question. So there are a couple of things. One of the big ones is starting the morning with outer accountability. So a big one is you want to start work at 9, 9:30, 10, whatever. Have a meeting at that time. Now someone's waiting for you. That's a big one. The other big one would be to start the morning with the easiest thing for you to do, the thing that's the most interesting, the thing you like the most about your job, and also create the lowest barrier of entry. Meaning, if there are steps or preparation or things like that, have them all done before, or create some way where they're not getting in the way of getting started.
I'm curious, how long do you think it takes the average person with ADHD that you're working for, your average client, to actually, you said in the beginning that you you start working with them by making the plans for them, and
Right.
you hope eventually the idea is that they see you doing this and kind of build that skill themselves. How long did it usually take for someone to be able to develop that skill themselves?
Okay. So as far as doing the plans for them, so I would say that that's limited to when we need to break something down because it's not natural for them. With other things, there's always, even with that, there's always an element of collaboration where sometimes I'll bring up a suggestion and I'll say, the suggestion only works if you're going to do it. What do you think? And they'll give me that look like not happening. So we're trying to work with the client's brain, not against it. So so there's always that collaborative element to it. But with that in mind, how long does it take till it sticks? So a particular strategy, every once in a while you have a nice miracle where it just sticks and just goes. That is great, but it does not typically work like that. I remember the first client I was working with. I was still in supervision, and we had some plans in place, and they were going great, and then everything kind of collapsed. And I'm one by one, I'm like, oh, where am I? What's going on? And I call my supervisor, and she's like, you're probably bugging out a little bit, right? I'm like, yeah, how'd you guess? And she goes, well, this happens more. She goes, yeah, well, this actually happens more often than not. I'm like, well, thanks for telling me. Um, but,
Appreciate the heads up.
well, yes, now I try to tell people in advance that this might happen. She happens to have been a wonderful supervisor, but but yeah, I might have liked to know that earlier, but no big. Um, I definitely took the lesson to heart more by taking it, by a little, fall off the bike there. But
Or not.
yeah, so usually it takes time. That was a more dramatic version. Usually things partially work and then don't really work, and you got to fix it. So it can really vary.
It seems like it seems like there's not a one type of medicine fix all type of thing, type of solution here, and it's a lot of trial and error. Is that true? Am I getting that correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct. But what we're usually looking at is why their brain is having a difficult time with this, which you usually know. I mean,
Hmm.
we'll discuss that, and then figure out how we can work over, around, under, and through it. Um, we leveraging a strength too. But I would say on average, the average client is a 2 to 4 month deal.
Okay. Oh wow. No, that's not too bad. But I wanna kind of zone in on what you just said there about understanding why their brain is having difficulty with it, with whatever the problem is. Do you wanna talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah.
So taking one example, let's say, so let's say when we talk procrastination, so somebody will be like, okay, I have to start work in the morning, but it's not happening. And I'll be like, okay, so what is happening? Describe that for me a little bit. I'll be like, well, I eat breakfast and then I check the news. And then 3 hours later, I'm done checking the news, but then I have a text. And then I'll be, okay, so we've seen this problem before. What do we do now? So first I'll describe to them that what happens is the news interests them, or they think it's important, and they get lost. They lose track of the time. ADHD brain struggles with time, loses track of the time. Um, so while they're reading that news, they completely lose track of what time it is and the fact that they need to be starting work. That can be what's happening, and that would be a standard thing to be happening in the ADHD brain. If that's what's happening, then we've kind of found what the problem is, and then we might need to figure out what to do about it. So that might mean they don't check the news in the morning, but that's very difficult. To go from being a news junkie to no idea what's happening, that's a big jump. What can we do to curb that process? Is there something they can do, like maybe get a news email that they just read the email? Now again, to go from 60 to 0 like that is also a big jump. So we might tease out what they can do, what they can't do. Some guys will be like, yeah, no news in the morning, let's do it. And we love that. We love that ADHD style enthusiasm. We'll take it. And sometimes that'll work and sometimes it won't. So we might need to figure out a way to pare it down. Maybe we'll say set an alarm at a certain time, but if you say set an alarm at, I don't know, let's say they wanted to start working at 9:30 and they've been starting work at 1, you say, okay, set an alarm at 11:30, work our way back. So that could be a way to do it that's more gradual. It will take more time, but has a chance of sticking that way. But sometimes it'll be like, oh, wait a second, no, I don't think it's that I like the news so much. I think I just don't want to start work. Oh, wait a second. Okay, why don't you want to start work? That becomes a whole different conversation. So we're working with the things that we can expect to happen in the ADHD brain, but because a few different things can be at play, so I can throw at them, what we might be looking at, but I need their input to be sure of what's happening in their brain. Only they know they're the only ones there. So that's what that.
Interesting. So you're looking for their input on what exactly the barrier to them starting in this specific case with procrastination. You're looking for their input on, well, we know the barrier is that you want to watch news, but what draws you to the news? What draws you to that, initial thing in the morning? Is it because you don't want to be working, or is it because you love listening to the news, or whatever it is? You need their input for that.
Yeah, exactly. Meaning I can take a guess, but it's really only going to work if I address the problem. So
Right.
if addressing the wrong problem won't get us to the promised land.
Right. I feel like addressing the wrong problem is something that can definitely get in the way.
So they say.
Yeah. Are there any other major things that like can get in the way of the process?
Well, that's a good question. So in the department of prioritizing, so the I mentioned before that the plans we create are very idiosyncratic. They're very case specific. So a lot of the things that can get in the way are vary from person to person, but they will look like this. Number one, writing down what you need to do. Number two, having the thing handy to look at. Number three, actually looking at it when you need it. Um, Number four, having a display that's user friendly. So if you get somebody once showed me, they said they wanted to use some kind of planner for kids. I think they specifically wanted kids with ADHD. That's why they showed it to me. I took a look and it's these tiny little boxes for each day. And I'm like, nobody's going to, I mean, I can't be in anyone else's brain, but I don't think people are going to look at this. It's too tight. So if it's not easy on the eyes, they'll be done. If it's a few clicks off of the home screen, it might never happen. If it's in a drawer, yeah. If it's in a drawer, it might never happen. If it's on the desk but it's closed, it might never happen. If you have to drive around, so it's nice that you have it, but it has to be with you. So where are you going to keep it? So I've had people keep it in the car, but if it's in the car, it's not in the glove compartment. It's in the passenger seat, and it can't call shotgun. So you got to call shotgun for it.
Yeah.
It's got to be there and open. So that's what can happen with the creation of a scheduling plan. With the procrastination, it can sometimes take time until we figure out what's at the root of that procrastination. Like I was saying before, um, if we work with one assumption and go down that road and then realize this isn't it, so it could take time till that happens.
Yeah. It's interesting. There were a few things you mentioned there that I want to talk about. The first is like you mentioned that there are some things as simple as like it can be in a drawer in the desk drawer and it's not going
Yeah,
to get done. It could be in a bot like something as like simple as that. It's kind of interesting how low the barrier to entry can be that just like kills the whole thing. Um, I
you're
wonder I
right.
wonder why that is. But you
So,
you see that with clients constantly
all the time. It makes a huge
all the
difference.
time.
The truth
That's
is, I
so
mean,
interesting.
their whole industries, they're really based on this. Like the credit card industry is based on the idea that people aren't going
Right,
to have
touch
cash.
to
They all give
touch
it to
to
step.
tap, touch to
Yeah,
tap even they say people spend way more money because you don't have to literally go into your wallet, take it out, and stick it in. You could just double click your power button on your phone and tap.
yeah,
They say that causes more people. I also, you know the study that they did where they asked people whether they wanted to opt in for certain things at the end of you're signing up for whatever, and they ask if you want to opt in,
right,
and they changed it from clicking to opt in versus clicking to opt out. And the amount
right,
of people that opted in because they didn't have to click, that barrier to entry was so small, but I don't remember what the numbers were, but it made such a big difference. But I wonder why does that make such a big difference, these little things?
right. So I would say in the context of the ADHD brain, it's that when a task is complex, meaning it has multiple components to it, that's a little bit daunting for the ADHD brain. It feels like even if it's not an avalanche, it's a mini avalanche. So that's what I would say in the context of the ADHD brain. But as you're pointing out, this works for everybody. Meaning they started. I don't remember when they started this a few years ago with the GPSs. It used to be there's an alternate route. Hit yes if you'd like the alternate route, and then it became there's an alternate route. We're going to put you on it. Hit no if you don't want it. Now there, the opt-in is simple. I'm trying to look at the road, so that's a good reason why I stick with the opt-in. But but in general, I think this is a total guess. I think human nature is that going with the flow feels easy. So when the flow is you're opting in unless you're opt out, sure, why not? What's the big deal? I'm not. I don't need to rain on anyone's party. It looks like it might be interesting. It's not like objectionable.
Yeah. Yeah,
But when I have to like
that's very interesting. But when you start, what were you saying? But when you have to do
when you have
something.
to like do something and initiates, then you really got to think about it. So meaning there's no flow to go with. The flow is nothing happened until it happens. So if they want to do this, I don't know. I'll think about it later, and then you just kind of let it
Kind
go.
of like an object in motion stays in motion.
Yeah, yeah, kind of.
I
Yeah,
don't know
well
if that
said. Well
comparison
said.
made any sense, but yeah, I also wanted to talk about something else you said, where you were talking about with coming up with strategic planning. You were talking about like writing things down and how important that is. And it's funny because throughout my whole life, I've heard self-help people, people like Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, and Jim Rohn. They talk about the importance of writing down your goals and, like you were saying, revisiting those goals and reading them again, and how important it can be to just get pen to paper and ideas on paper. um I'm curious why that's so important, because people are really, really into this idea, so it must work. But I'm curious, what about having these ideas on paper makes you so much more likely to succeed?
Right. So in the context of the ADHD brain, it's not so deep. It's just that there's a good chance of forgetting.
Oh.
But but for everybody, including folks with ADHD, including everybody, writing something down makes it look real. It's especially true, more so it seems, when it's written by hand than even on a computer. They'll have clients who certainly prefer the technological option, but it seems I think that it just feels more real to the body, feels more real to the brain. That's what I think. But that's a bit of a guess.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious. We were talking about a lot of like the main issues that you deal with,
Right.
like procrastination, and like you said, that you deal with strategic planning and stuff like that. Are there any more kind of niche problems that you deal with some clients?
Right. Oh, good question. Yes. So, strangely, attention is not the most common thing that I deal with, even though the name of the condition is attention deficit disorder. But attention is one. I would say three big ones. Three and a half. Attention, emotional dysregulation. I'll explain in a second, and the part two of my training, which was anxiety and OCD. So on the attention side of things, so although ADHD stands for attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, or enter your favorite joke there about donuts and whatever. Um, so the attention deficit is not really a deficit of attention; it's an impairment of controlling where the attention goes. I like to say the ADHD brain's attention is like the 500-pound gorilla; it goes where it wants to go. So somebody used the analogy, I don't remember whose it was, but it wasn't mine, that the non ADHD brain, for the non ADHD brain, paying attention is like holding a flashlight in one place. It stays in place until like your arm gets tired and you put it down, whatever. For the ADHD brain, it's like holding a fire hose on full blast. It's going, but it doesn't go where you ask it to go. It goes where it wants to go. So it's there. But what that means is this. So the attention goes somewhere, not where you ask it to go. So sometimes that will be the most distracting thing. Sometimes it'll be the most interesting thing. So like the proverbial, fly buzzing around the room, or the ice cream truck outside, or the fire truck, it'll go there. Um, that's what'll happen sometimes. And sometimes it'll be the most interesting thing in the room, which is where the ADHD superpower of hyperfocus comes from. Meaning, you can, if you find something interesting, you can tap into that, zero into that, and sometimes it's hard to get out. But that's the attention side of things. So in my work, you'll have the obvious attention challenges. Sometimes I work with teenagers or college age kids, as they need to either study or get through class. So that's where the attention comes in, or at work. Either entrepreneurs who need to do something boring, or more commonly, it'll be employees who need to stick through something that they've been asked to do. That's the attention side of things. Emotional dysregulation, so that refers to this. The ADHD brain feels things more strongly, feels emotion more strongly, and has a more difficult time reining in the emotional reaction. So what that can look like is these very strong emotional reactions. The good news is that they don't last so long. The bad news is that the duration is not so much fun. So emotional dysregulation is that challenge, and sometimes we need to do work on that. And then number 3, anxiety and OCD. So exactly what they sound like. Anxiety and OCD are travel buddies with ADHD. So when they come up, we deal with those also.
That is funny. I kind of always thought of OCD as like an opposite to ADHD. So if we can kind of talk about each one of those three problems, starting with the attention thing. Hyperfocus can be good when it's, something productive, but when they hyperfocus on, let's say, if they're a student in class and they're hyperfocusing on their doodles, they're doodling instead of what they're supposed to be paying attention, or the fly passing by, or whatever it is. What are some things you can do to, help those students, or even if it's an entrepreneur or whoever it is who's dealing with attention problems? What can you do to help them, kind of zone back into the important thing at hand? And also, is there a way to kind of unlock, quote unquote, unlock that superpower of hyper attention to something and be able to kind of laser in on what you want to be hyper focused in on?
Yes. Okay. Great questions. So part 1, what are we doing for them? So in a classroom setup or in a work setup, two starting points. One is to create a framework for whatever it is you need to be doing, which also partially addresses your second point, which is this. When something is familiar, it goes from the boring to the maybe a little bit interesting. So let's say you come to class and you speak to a teacher before, which by the way helps, create the skill of advocating for yourself. So if you speak to a teacher before, a teacher says, okay, we're going to talk about these 3 things today. Now you come into class with an outline. Now your interest has been piqued just a little bit. So now, number 1, the class isn't boring, so it's something to pay attention to. Number 2, if the teacher did, if the material actually is interesting to you, now that they've whet your appetite a little bit, you can tap into some of your own focus. That's one part of it. Another part is, it sounds simple, but it's not, which is taking breaks. Taking breaks sounds easy, but it isn't, because sometimes people take a break and they never come back. Um, and this is especially true with young people, but it is true with adults too. I've seen both, and so that doesn't work. So you need to take a break. Two big things about a break. Number 1, I always say this is actually my own coinage, and that is you take the break before the break takes you. What that means is kind of what it sounds like. If you push yourself till you're all the way on empty, then you got to like pull yourself off the floor with a spatula, and that hurts. So what you do instead is you take the break before. Let's say it's actually happened. I was learning with a kid, and he says, he looks at the clock, and he goes, Rabbi, I got half an hour in the tank. I'm like, okay, deal, half an hour, let's do it. So we learn for a while. He goes, okay, I'm done. We look up at the clock, half an hour on the nose. So very impressive. But the point is, what you can sometimes do in a situation like that is, if you know you have half an hour in the tank, take a break after 20 minutes. So now you take the break on your own terms. You come back feeling energized. You have more control to bring yourself back. But there's more. Since you're taking a break in the middle of something that's not interesting, that's what you need the break for. So one needs to assure that they come back. So what we try to do is take a break that has a natural end to it. So my favorite break is the walk around the block. There are other things like that, snack, cup of coffee. So those sort of things have a natural ending to them, and everyone's different. So what works for them is going to be going to vary from person to person, but that's the general idea. So what you mentioned about hyperfocus. So if somebody can tap into their hyperfocus in some way. So for example, let's say they're learning about, I don't know, let's say they're learning about history and they're a news junkie. So if they can find a way that the thing that the teacher is teaching in history is relevant to current events, all of a sudden they're problem solving for something interesting for them. Look out, they're taking that classroom over.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like each one of these problems can have an episode of their own. But for time's sake, let's talk about the emotional dysregulation. And maybe if you could talk a little bit about how you can where that problem comes from, why it's harder for ADHD people to regulate their emotions,
Yeah.
and some of the tips and tricks you kind of help them that help them work through.
Okay. So the where it comes from is the ADHD brain feels emotions more strongly and has a harder time regulating behavior. So somebody makes the obnoxious comment um, to the non-ADHD brain that hurts a little. Maybe you snap back. Maybe you hold it in. Whatever. For the ADHD brain that wants to do that, so here's what happens. Phase one, the comment hurts more. Phase two, you want to hold it in, but it's harder. It's harder to hold it in. Sometimes it pops out before you know what happened. And sometimes the reaction is very harsh, a yelling match, physical or whatever. It can be there's a range, but it can be it can be complicated. So here's what we do. Nothing, these things can take time and nothing's perfect, but the general formula goes like this. Number one, you want to know when the trigger is likely to happen. What's likely to set a person off. So, for example, if you have meetings about a certain subject that the company deals with, and this subject just really gets you going, so you want to be warned in advance that this might happen. So that's one part. Another part is to know the physical sensations in your body. Your body tells us when it's triggered. If you know to look for that, then you can nip it in the bud. And as soon as you feel that sensation before the explosion, you can say, "Excuse me, I need to go." Whatever, excuse yourself for a minute.
Take a break. Right.
Well, yeah,
What are some of those most common sensations in the body that are the body giving you?
write that message. So tightness in the chest is a big one, and sometimes a feeling in the head. So actually, when I was studying, I remembered this. I don't know why this stood out in my mind so much, but it is so random. And it illustrates this very well. I was learning with kids, and somebody made a comment about white chocolate not being white, not being real chocolate. Now I happen to like white chocolate, and I was like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Whoa!" And I felt this tightness in my chest, and then I'm like, "Who cares?" You know, who cares? And I looked it up. White chocolate does not come from the cocoa bean, and that's okay. I like it anyway. But like somebody can say something that like grates on a food you like or a thing you like, and you're like, what? And you just catch that physical reaction. So for me, it's tightness in the chest. People have it in their head also, in the eyes. I think those are the most standard ones. I think there are other ones also. But what I sometimes tell people is to keep an eye out for it. Jeff Copper, who's the host of Attention Talk Radio, also was a guest on this podcast, has told people to watch if they are Republican, they should watch MSNBC. If they are Democrat, they should watch Fox News, and then they will know what their physical triggers are.
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny though, because to me, the white chocolate scenario, that seemed like a very rational reaction to that one.
Right? Okay. So,
Yeah.
we are related.
Okay, so we talked about the attention, we talked about the emotional dysregulation. And what was the last one again?
Anxiety and OCD.
Where does that come from and how, yeah, so first, where does that come from?
Okay, great question. Where does it originate? So sometimes the brain can have a predisposition for it. Sometimes it can come from the outside. In the context of ADHD, what can often happen is they're asked to do things. They know they need to do them, but they can't, and they don't know how. That turns into a pattern. You can get that form of anxiety, but they happen to be neurologically related also, as far as where they come from. As far as what they're going to look like for me. So since what I'm looking at is skills, so what's going to happen is they're at work, and let's say in that meeting where that person says that offensive thing, so the ADHD side of them gets angry. The anxiety side of them is replaying that scene in their head because they're very bothered by it, and they can't believe they didn't have the right thing to say back. So now they're the OCD version of it is they're playing it over and over and over till they get that right thing to say. The anxiety version is
Sorry to interrupt, but does that also play into like the emotional aspect of it? You said they feel things, both positive and negative emotions more than other people. Does that play into it at all because they're, replaying it over and over again, or are those two things not really correlated at all?
tell me more. What do you mean?
Meaning, let's say, like you said, let's say, like you said, someone makes a little comment, right? That's generally not a big deal, right? But to the ADHD brain, they'll snap back at them. Is it sometimes because can that come from a place of not really anxiety as much as like OCD, where they're kind of obsessing about that and okay, well, what does this person think about me? And kind of, leads them into a loop of negative thinking towards that person, which kind of causes them to react.
Or so can the fact that they feel things more strongly, can it be more of a reason for their brain to latch onto it? Is that your question?
It was interesting. I kind of thought about it the other way, but I could be completely wrong. I thought of it as, do they feel more strongly about certain things because their brain latches onto it?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think so. Meaning the ADHD brain without OCD can still will still feel strongly about things. The OCD piece will bring them into that loop.
Right. Also, like you were saying before, sometimes with the emotional dysregulation and the stronger emotions, it's more of an instant reaction and time. You give it time. You said they'll calm down, and it's usually short. And if you know to just duck and take cover for the short time, it's fine. But you could do a lot of damage in a short period of time. But yeah, sorry. Let's get back to talking about the anxiety and OCD part of it.
All right. So what happens is they can get stuck in that loop. In the OCD side, there will be some kind of mental compulsion where they won't feel like they're done until they have the right answer or the right solution or the right something. On the anxiety side, without a compulsion, they'll just be very distracted and lost. Um, so that's where I would come in.
It's
Um,
funny. It's funny. It almost sounds like it's the hyper focusing part of the ADHD. Like they're hyper focusing on one thing, and that's causing the OCD. Does that make sense?
so I think they'll feed off each other. Meaning OCD without
Yeah.
ADHD, they can still get lost in that loop. That's
Right. Of
called
course.
it's called pure OCD, where they just get lost, in a mental loop, and it's an obsession without a physical compulsion.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the instead of having a physical compulsion where they do something to relieve the distress that the thought is causing them, I'll take a step back. OCD happens when there is a distressing thought, and a compulsion relieves them of the distressing thought, but just for a little bit, and then it comes right back. So that a typical, the textbook case of OCD would be somebody touches something, they're like, oh, that makes me dirty. Oh, now if I touch something or someone's going to die, and they're picturing, it's horrible. And they're picturing, they kill this person, it's all their fault. And they're imagining, horrible things. So when they wash their hands, they're like, oh, phew, now I'm not going to kill anybody. But then they touch somebody else, touch something else. And then the loop starts over again. That's the classic one, or the leaving the oven on or something like that. Pure O happens when it's just a thought. So when the compulsion is just mental. So they have this thought that they offended this guy, and now he's really mad at them, and now they have to figure out, is he really mad at them? Maybe he is, maybe he's not, and they're going over and over, and they're just trying to reassure themselves in their mind. That would be pure O. So there's no physical compulsion, but it's the same operating system.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So when it comes to the problem of anxiety and OCD with the ADHD brain, what are some of the most common, tools you can help them with?
So the standard, I like to split it into two categories. Category one is identifying that this is anxiety or OCD, meaning sometimes the body sends us a signal to be anxious for a good reason. So is this for a good reason, or is this anxiety? That's one piece of it. The other piece is, even if you can establish that it's anxiety, the next thing you need to do is calm the body down, because you might know that in your head, but the body is still sending you this signal. That's the harder part.
Can they be
Um,
similar signals that the body will send you for the emotional dysregulation stuff? Or is this kind of
yes.
something different? Yeah.
No, it is similar. Yeah, yeah,
Similar. Okay.
yeah. It's the fight or flight response. The body's sending you the adrenaline, cortisol, like you're in danger. You got to do something about it. So in these contexts, so what we'll do is the anxious brain and the OCD brain, they don't usually make things up from scratch. They usually take things that are real and magnify them. So, for example, you say something to someone at a meeting, and they're like, "Oh no, did I insult them?" The anxious brain is trying to figure it out. The OCD brain is trying to figure it out, each in their own way. But we'll try to figure. What we might try to identify is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that you offended him, and what will happen that is so bad if you offended him. These are all tricky, meaning, first of all, sometimes maybe it did really offend them, and maybe you're going to be in big trouble. Maybe. But I guess the approach I use is called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and what that does is there are certain thought patterns that we have that take us down a road. So, for example, in this context, did I insult that person? If I insulted them, I'm in big trouble, etc., etc., etc. If you can catch that thought pattern and question it, so maybe it's right, but maybe it's not, and maybe it's there's a on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 3, so it's not so scary. That's what we're going for. These things range very much. So, for example, there are certain people for whom the thoughts are so strong or the emotions are so strong that they'll need medication. There are some people for whom these thoughts are coming from a place of so much history, trauma, etc., that this method's not going to be enough for them. But in some situations, this works fine. Like this will get them through the workday, and sometimes both. Sometimes, meaning that with the therapist, they'll work out what's under the hood. But for getting through the workday, this will do the trick.
I feel like with everything that we've been talking about today, I feel like all of this stuff is something that maybe shows up a little more in students. When they're younger, they probably have a little more trouble regulating their emotions anyway from hormones and whatever goes on in the teenage body and brain. And I bet it has a massive effect. But how does your training as an and experience as an ADHD coach translate into being a Rebbe and teaching students?
So what happens is this: I wouldn't say that the life state the life stage is a major piece for me. Meaning, ADHD is an operating system, and knowing what I'm looking at when I'm in a classroom, when I see a kid who has ADHD behaving a certain way, I don't really factor in. I mean, I factor in the fact that he's a kid, so the expectations are different. But other than that, because of my training, I know the ADHD operating system, and it's super helpful for me to know, number one, the kid's not being obnoxious to be obnoxious. I mean, sometimes teenagers are obnoxious. That's okay. But what the ADHD side of it is not coming from looking to be obnoxious. It's not vindictive. Very often, they literally didn't hear me. And sometimes I've pushed them too hard. So true stories. One of them, I told the guys to get their notebooks. I looked over at one guy who told me before the school year started he had ADHD. I take a look at him. His eyes are completely somewhere else. So he has no notebook. He's standing in the corner. I think he's talking to somebody. And if I didn't know what I knew, that would be something to give a kid a hard time for. You're trying to start class and he's like standing in the corner talking. But I realized he didn't hear me. So I walked over to him and I said, "Hey, we're going to get our notebooks." And he said, "Oh, sure." That was easy. See, he saved everyone a lot of frustration. And by the way, I did that for that guy the whole year. I would tell guys to get there, whatever they needed, and then I'd give him a personal invitation, and he had no idea, and it worked great. No problem. Saved everybody so much aggravation. Another time was I needed the guys to start work on something, and one kid didn't start. I said, "Are you ready?" He goes, "Not yet." Okay, not yet. We'll give him a few minutes. I check in with him in a few minutes. I asked him again if he's ready. He's not ready. A few minutes later, okay, I'm ready. He starts writing. He drops his pen, picks up his notebook, and chucks it across the room. Like, okay. So then everybody looked at me, and he looked at me as though like he's in big trouble. But I knew what I did. I was pushing him too much. I needed to give him more time. I wanted him to get started because there's class and we're going to run out of time or whatever. But that was on me. So when he chucked his notebook across the room, it landed in a locker, and I said, "Nice shot." And like, and it took the tension out of the room. A kid does need to learn that they can't do that in the classroom, but I don't teach little guys. I'm teaching, I teach high school. So he's probably gotten in trouble for this before. He does not need to get an earful about it anymore. He knows that it's a thing he shouldn't do. And, you just need to get him through.
Yeah, I feel like that's a classic case from his end also of like the emotional dysregularity. What's the word?
Dysregulation. Yeah.
Dysregulation, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was textbook emotional dysregulation, and it was my mistake to push him. But knowing those things, knowing what I knew, when were the difference between this kid getting in trouble for something that was really kind of my fault, and the first kid getting in trouble with no idea what happened.
Yeah. Do you think most not students necessarily both students and people in general though with ADHD know themselves well enough to be able to say like to be able to, let's say, identify the difference between, oh, I'm actually not ready versus, oh, I'm just procrastinating it and it's not that I'm not ready, it's just I don't want to do it type of thing, if that makes sense?
Right. It's a really good question. I want to say once people know what to look for, they can figure it out. Meaning, if somebody hasn't done any reading or any coaching, or like it doesn't know how their ADHD brain works, then they're just not going to know the difference, and they'll probably be so frustrated that they won't care. I mean, that's or not that they actually won't, but they'll express that they won't. They just can't deal with it anymore. But once a person knows, I think they know what to look for. Because I think I asked people this in session, like what's getting in the way, and if they take the time to think about it, they can usually answer me.
Okay, that's awesome. It looks like our time's starting to run up here, so I did want to ask one final question. I wanted to know if someone comes away from this episode, listening to this episode, is there one basic skill or takeaway that you can give to that person listening to this?
Yes, I would say the most basic thing a person should walk away with is trying to understand their brain, understand how it works, and then from there, that's where you can start to try to create solutions or find someone to help you create solutions. But understanding how your brain works is really, really the beginning, the real starting point.
All right, knowledge is power. And Rabbi Shmuel Reich, want to thank you so much again for all the knowledge that you've empowered us with today. This was an amazing, amazing episode. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Yehuda. This is great.
Awesome.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nephesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.